faking. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the losing fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, February 17th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the NBA All-Star Game and its failures and how potentially we could fix it. In this segment, we turn our attention to an All-Star break that has done wonders for its sport. The Canada, USA, Finland, and Sweden 4 nations face-off. We had one of the wildest hockey games in the history of the sport take place over the weekend, where the US and Canada matched up for the first time that had NHL hockey players participating in international tournaments for the last 10 years, and it exploded like wildfire. We'll talk about that game and the potential rematch that's going to take place on Thursday's final between the US and Canada. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, February 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of hockey talk here early on in the show for that, but it was a massive game. 4.4 million viewers saw one of the biggest games of hockey in the history of international hockey. The U.S. and Canada have a usually pretty solid relationship, but this one started off wild. The Canadians have been booing the national anthem at all the games played in Montreal. And that, I guess, didn't sit right with the Tkachuk brothers, who sent a couple texts over to members of the Canadian team and said, hey, I think we're going to fight right off the face-off. And this wasn't one of those where all the players on the ice drop their gloves and you get 5 1v1s going right off the face-off, which does happen every once in a while. This was a series of fight. We had both Tkachuk brothers drop the gloves right after the first 2 face-offs. The first one, we had Hagel and Tkachuk go after it. That one immediately set the tone for this game. 1 second in. 2 seconds in, a second fight takes place with the other Tkachuk brother taking on another member of the Canadian team. Both of them meet in the penalty box, brothers having a good time, and then 5 seconds later, 3 fights in 9 seconds. We had JT Miller going after one of the defensemen. He got absolutely outmatched, but it set the tone. It was going to be a physical game, and a physical game it was. After that third fight, there were no more fights, but this was one of the hardest hitting hockey games that I have seen in a very long time. Players being hit off of their feet like nobody's business, being boarded, being sent flying like it is like these two countries were bitter rivals, and it was a lot of fun to watch. Connor McDavid opened up the scoring for Canada on a beautiful breakaway shot, splitting to the defense, getting in there past one of the best goalies in all of U.S. history, the best goalie in the game today, trying to go for back-to-back Vezina Trophy winners. Connor Hellebuck, he beats him on the short side with a beautiful backhand. After that, it was all U.S. The U.S. ties the game, then they get one in the second period and one more in the third on an empty net to finish that game 3-1. That game clinched their spot in the Four Nations face-off finale taking place Thursday in Boston. Every other team had 2 points. The way that it's working in this tournament is 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime win, and 1 point for an overtime loss. The U.S. had won both of its games in regulation. They got to 6 points. Every other team, through a combination of overtime wins and overtime losses, had 2 points in the bag. There was a game between Canada and Finland today that saw Canada win 5-3, put in regulation, putting them up to 5 points. They also had taken down Sweden in overtime, so they have the tiebreaker over Sweden, meaning that Canada and the U.S. will meet up one more time on Thursday in Boston to take each other on to see who can take home the Four Nations Face-Off trophy. That is going to be a awesome game to watch, and I think everyone should tune in on Thursday to see that one, because I don't know if it's going to be as wild as this first one where fights are, but this one is going to be just as charged. It's going to be in front of an American audience. I can't wait to see what happens. This one should be good. You have McDavid and Crosby and McKinnon going up, all healthy, most likely, for this one. Cale Makar was healthy for the clinching game for Canada today. They're all going to be healthy. The one question and the one thing that makes this a little bit lopsided is at the goalie position. I mentioned Connor Hellebuck as the U.S. goalie. That's something that Canada doesn't really have. Canada's been struggling with goaltenders. Jordan Binnington is their starting goalie. He's started all of the games that they have played thus far in the tournament, and he just hasn't looked his best. He hasn't looked awful, but he hasn't looked his best. There aren't a lot of great goalies behind him, and the one thing that's head-scratching about this tournament, and the craziest thing for me when we're looking at the way that these rosters are built and constructed, is the way that Canada built this team. Logan Thompson is second place to Connor Hellebuck this season as far as Vezina voting goes. That's the best goalie in the NHL. He is also a Canadian. Instead, they go for Jordan Binnington, who's struggling this season, has a less than 900 save percentage. It's not very good. It's not what you need out of your goalie in a tournament as big as this. And I think when we were talking about all-star games, this is something that the NBA should take notice of, right? We see how much these guys are getting up for their teams. We see how much these guys are getting up for their country. These are some of the fastest, most physical hockey games that I have seen in a very long time. This is playoff atmosphere level stuff, especially when it was up in Canada. They were juiced. They were ready to go. Those fans were going wild. Down in Boston for the American team, it should be a lot of fun. So everyone should tune in on Thursday to see the U.S. take on Canada in a rematch, this time for the Cup. Don't know how it's going to go. I got a feeling it might go the other way, but the way that the goaltenders are, it's going to make it tough for Canada to win. But let me know what your thoughts are. What'd you think of that game? It was awesome, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna turn our attention over to the NFL offseason. The New York Giants had a lot of struggles this year. That's not very much a secret, but we're going to talk about what they can do to have a perfect offseason, what they need to do, who's leaving, and what they look like as they get set for the 2025-2026 season. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, February 17th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over what's going on in the all-star breaks of the two major American sports right now. The NBA has had a little bit of a disappointing all-star break, no doubt about it. The NHL has had a complete success. We talked about that in the last segment. In this one, we turn our attention over to the NFL. We continue our series breaking down what the perfect offseason would be for each and every one of the NFL teams. In this segment, we turn our attention to the New York Giants. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, February 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of NFL offseason talk as the New York Giants have had a little bit of a disaster season. One of the worst seasons in the 100-year history of the New York Giants. They go 3-14, obviously missed the playoff, tied for the worst record in the NFL with the Browns and the Titans. They get the number 3 overall pick. So not only did they have the worst season, but they also got the worst reward out of all of that. And that kind of puts them out of position in an already weak quarterback class with a team that desperately needs a quarterback. There's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, but I don't think there's one in the league that needs one as badly as the New York Giants do. They let go of their former 6th overall pick, Daniel Jones, who they had signed to a $40 million a year contract. He had his out year this year. They let him go before the season ended. He went and signed with Minnesota, is probably going to stay there as the backup if I had to guess. The Giants need to find an answer. Right now, the quarterbacks that they have under contract is nobody, right? Drew Lock is a free agent. He was their backup. You had Tim Boyle, who is also a backup, also a free agent. Tommy DeVito, also a free agent. They have no quarterbacks currently rostered. They need to go find someone, whether that be in the draft at number 3, where Shedeur Sanders has been very, very much rumored to them. They got the cleats that he had made about the Giants. He played catch with Malik Neighbors, and Shedeur Sanders, from all reports, seems very confident he's not getting past that number 3 pick if he is even still available there. But let's talk about the possibilities of the Giants not drafting him, because this is not the strongest quarterback class. And I can talk on and on about Shedeur Sanders and the things that make him good, but he's also not a guy that I think is wired to succeed with this version of the New York Giants. I think he's someone that needs to be able to get behind either a good offensive line or sit for a year behind a veteran quarterback. And neither of those things have the boxes checked in New York. I think you can say that about just about every quarterback in this class this year. I think Shedeur Sanders is a guy that can be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, but I don't think he's quite ready to be that guy. Cam Ward also can be a starting quarterback in the NFL, not quite ready to be that guy. I think he's a little closer than Shedeur Sanders is, but you can say that about everyone. Jackson Dart is someone that's been flying up boards. You can get a Kyle McCord, who's also been kind of up there. You can go after a Will Howard later in the draft if you're the Giants. But I don't think it's worth spending that number 3 overall pick on Shedeur Sanders. Now, there are rumors that potentially they'd be in the market to trade for Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, an aging quarterback at age 37, could finish up his career in New York. They would probably have to give up that number 3 overall pick. And that's not necessarily the smartest thing for team building, but when you look at the quarterback market, are you going to go out and get Aaron Rodgers? Are you going to go out and get Russell Wilson? Are you going to go out and get Sam Darnold? It's just not anything that really sticks out to you as a great QB answer. Sam Darnold, I don't think would succeed behind the Giants' offensive line, right? No question about that. You also have an Aaron Rodgers that I don't think would be very happy to go and play for the New York Giants. Russell Wilson, I think, is an interesting one. Russell Wilson could come in. He's got his connections as far as baseball goes with the New York Yankees, being a pseudo spring training player for them early in his Seattle days. But is he really going to come to the New York Giants after hanging out with the Steelers this year? I don't really know. If there's going to be a veteran quarterback to go to the Giants, I think it would be Russell Wilson. It's the one that makes the most sense, but I don't know if the Giants are really all into that. So I think they're going to get a quarterback at pick 3, but if they don't, they can get the best offensive lineman in the draft out of LSU, Will Campbell, right? He's going to be a monster. You can put him on the opposite side from Andrew Thomas, and that would make your offensive line immediately better. Then you go and you get potentially a Jackson Dart in the second round. That would be, I think, the perfect draft for the New York Giants that they could do. They build up that offensive line, and they're able to get potentially the quarterback of the future. But let's say that's not what they're able to do. Let's see what's happening with their free agents right now. Right now, they have a lot of free agents. They also have a lot of cap space. They've got the 13th most cap space in the league, $47 million, kind of right in that middle range with a lot of other teams. They have one major free agent that I think would be worth re-signing, a couple that maybe they can go out and get, but wouldn't be the end of the world if they lost. Isaiah Simmons, a high draft pick of the Cardinals just about 5 or 6 years ago, is someone that I think could be interesting to go and pick up, to go and re-sign. He's an athlete. He hasn't really panned out as much as I personally thought he would. Azeez Ojulari, though, is the big one that I think they should keep. He is 24 years old. I think he's one of the more underrated edge rushers in the NFL today. In limited action this season, he's been hit with some injury issues, and I know they're pretty stacked over there at edge with Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, but it never hurts to have more pass rush. Keeping Azeez Ojulari in the building probably wouldn't be too expensive, and if he's a guy that you can extend his role, maybe get him to play a little bit more on the inside, or maybe put Thibodeau or Burns on the inside, get him outside a little bit, that would be something that's worth it. I don't think they're going to be able to re-sign him. Darius Slayton is an interesting one. He's someone that has a lot of speed, and he's a guy that I think has flashed potential, but on the Giants, it just has not really fit. So I don't think they're getting him back. They're going to have a lot of money to go out and get players. Rumors, like I said, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp have been rumored to go over there. I don't really see that happening either. I just don't think the Giants are going to be willing to trade their assets like they did, especially after the most disastrous offseason in their history, letting Saquon Barkley walk. Just every wrong decision was made over the last couple of seasons. Brian Daboll has one more shot. They're going to go all in on this year, and I think it was smart for them to keep Daboll around. As far as keeping Joe Schoen around, I don't love it. I think he's a guy that had the opportunity to make a pretty solid offseason. Instead, he made a lot of the wrong decisions, and it's put them in this situation where now they're in the basement of the league. What I need them to go get in the offseason as far as free agents go, they need to go get another corner. They've got some young corners that stepped up big time, but they don't have a lot of depth there. Pick up some offensive linemen as well, and if you can't get a quarterback in the draft, if your guy is not going to be available, the Giants need to go out and they need to find their guy in free agency. Whether that be a stopgap guy, they can't be the last one in line for quarterbacks. They're not in an advantageous spot for it, and they can't give up too much for it. But let me hear your thoughts. What would the perfect Giants offseason be? I'd love to hear it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the MLB. Baseball season right around the corner. We're going to talk a little bit about the San Francisco Giants and what their year might look like after finishing 80-82 last year and missing the playoffs. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows. Available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, February 17th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over what a dream offseason might look like for the New York Giants. In this segment, we turn our attention over to baseball, stick with the Giants, but go across the country and look at San Francisco. We're going to talk a little bit about what they did this offseason and if it's going to mean some improvements for a team that finished 80-82 and fourth place in their division last year. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, February 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of MLB season preview. The season is just under a month away at this point, and we're continuing our trek through the NL West. We went over the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Diamondbacks last week. This week, we go to the fourth place team in that division, the San Francisco Giants. The San Francisco Giants weren't super active in the free agency market this season, but they were very impactful with their moves. They were able to extend third baseman Matt Chapman for a pretty big term contract in the middle of last season. That was a huge get for them. He was having a massive year at third base, but then they went and got his partner in crime, a shortstop, one of the best shortstops in all of baseball, in Willy Adames, a 7-year contract for him, and that was one of the biggest free agents out there. Coming from Milwaukee, a massive stadium, just like a massive stadium at Oracle Park where they play in San Francisco, he was able to mash about 20 plus home runs every single season over there. If he's able to do that here, which I think it's a little bit easier to hit some home runs there, Willy Adames is going to be a huge get. He's a Gold Glove level shortstop. They have him locked up, and now the defense on the left side of the infield is going to be insane. They also went out and got Justin Verlander, one of the future first ballot Hall of Famers, for a 1-year contract. Justin Verlander is going to continue to go out there, and he's a really solid third rotation piece, right? They need to go out and get someone to replace Blake Snell after he opted out of his contract that they were able to get him at the very tail end of the offseason almost a year ago. Mark Canha, also free agent, as well as Michael Conforto. Conforto and Snell both went over to the Dodgers. Not great for them, as they're going to have to face them this season in the same division. But their moves this offseason were few, but they were impactful, and that's what we love to see. We don't need to see a Dodgers to-do list of moves. We don't need to see 5, 6, 7, 8 moves. The most important thing for a team, especially a young team like the San Francisco Giants, is to make these impactful moves for the future. The Giants have kind of been stuck in this baseball purgatory for a while. They've been good, but not great, barely scratching a wild card spot or sitting on the outside. Last season, 80 wins, not quite enough, but they weren't super far off either. They were less than 7 games out of making the playoffs in the NL, and I think what they did this season absolutely improved it. Did improve their lineup enough to make that run? We'll see. Right now, this lineup projected on day one, they have Lamont Wade Jr., first baseman leading off, then Willie Adames, the shortstop free agent get. Center field, they're putting Jung Ho Lee, who isn't the most exciting name out there, but Matt Chapman in the cleanup spot at third base, and Heliot Ramos in left field, who had a huge season last year. Mike Yastrzemski, always a solid bat at the bottom of the order, as well as Tyler Fitzgerald, who's got a little bit of pop. Wilmer Flores is going to be that kind of old man of the team at DH and 8. And Patrick Bailey, the catcher, a young catcher, had a huge season last year, is primed to make a huge jump. Patrick Bailey is just based on defense, one of the best catchers in the game already, and he's got a little bit of bat. If he can continue to work on his hit to a little bit, maybe add a little bit of power, especially hitting at the bottom of the lineup here, if he can go off, this can be a massive, massive year for the Giants and Patrick Bailey. But it's not just the lineup. This lineup, if I had to rate it out of 10, probably give it a solid 7-ish out of 10. This is a good lineup. You've got a couple weak spots, but up and down, there's not too many spots where you're like, great, I'm going to be able to breeze through this. The rotation, on the other hand, is a little bit weak at the end. You've got Logan Webb at starting pitcher 1, Robbie Ray at 2, Justin Verlander at 3. That's a pretty good 1-2-3 punch, which is going to be good if they can stay healthy and make the playoffs. Having a 1-2-3 punch like that is good. Then you go to Jordan Hicks, who isn't necessarily the worst 4, but he's a guy that I don't think the Giants would love to have at 4, and Kyle Harrison at 5. Concerns me just a little bit, this starting rotation, especially when you compare it to the starting rotations of everybody else in the NL West. But overall, having a top 3 of Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, and Justin Verlander is going to strike some fear in just about any series that they go in. And the bullpen, especially the back end, is going to be pretty good. They've got 2 guys that have over 11 Ks per 9 in Ryan Walker and Camilo Doval. Those 2 guys combined for 33 saves last season. You also have Taylor Rogers in the back end, who's not necessarily going to be a closer, but does have some pretty good stuff as a setup man in the 8th inning. It looks like Ryan Walker is projected to be the closer for them this season, but you do have a guy in Doval who, if he can control his walk issue just a little bit, he was at 5 walks per game, 5 walks per 9 last season, as opposed to 2 walks per 9 for Ryan Walker. He could be the guy that retakes that closer spot. Overall, this is a Giants team that did improve this season. It was this offseason. It wasn't a massive improvement, but getting a guy like Willie Adames to come in and be your shortstop of the future for a young team that's still trying to figure out where to go after the surprise retirement of Buster Posey a couple seasons ago. They're still trying to figure out how to get out of this middle spot. They don't want to tank because this team is too good to tank, right? This team is too good to tank, but not good enough to really blow up and get all the pieces you want. So they're going to be in this kind of weird middle spot for a while. Vegas has them projected at 80.5 wins, the same win total that they had last season, going 80-82. Like I said, I think they improved this season. It's not the most drastic improvement, and I don't think they're going to quite be able to scratch the playoffs, especially with the improvement of everybody else in their division. But I do think they'll be able to get to about 82 wins, which is where I have them. I've got them going 82-80 this season, because I really do like that addition of Willie Adames and Justin Verlander, especially if he can stay healthy. Verlander chasing 300 wins. He's oh so close. That's what he said his goal is. He's not going to stop pitching until his arm falls off or until he gets there. And I think there's a good shot that Verlander can get to that 300 win mark this season. But let me know what you think. What do you think of the Giants offseason? Do you think the San Francisco Giants did a good job, a bad job, and what do you think their record's going to be this season? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we get to one of the most important meetings in college football history, as the Big Ten and the SEC are holding a meeting this week down in New Orleans to determine the fate and the future of college sports. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, February 17th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over a little bit of the San Francisco Giants offseason and season preview as the MLB season is just about a month away. In this segment, we turn our attention to one of the most consequential meetings that is taking place in the history of college football, as the Big Ten and the SEC, the ruling class of college football, have decided to get together this weekend down in New Orleans. We'll talk about what could come out of it, and we'll give you updates for the rest of the week. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, February 17th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into one of the most consequential meetings that's happening in the history of college football, a sport-altering meeting, and I don't say that lightly. This is one, as we go into some of the most important and impactful years for the future of the sport of college football. These two leagues, the two powerhouse conferences, the Power Two, as some people are calling them, the Big Ten and the SEC, are trying to keep control forever. And one thing that is really cool about sports, one thing that I love about sports, is the fact that it's ever-changing. The fact that a dynasty that looks like it'll never end, a league that looks like it'll be on top forever, will not be on top forever. It will end eventually. You can only keep the dominance going for so long. And right now, the Big Ten and the SEC are milking that dominance, that current dominance, for everything that it is worth. You have them going over the potential of changing the playoff format from 12 teams to either 14 or 16, which is most likely going to happen as they're just going to keep expanding to get more money. But the big issue with this is not the amount of teams. Sure, I think 12 was already a little bit too much, and expanding it more is not great. But the big issue is the fact that they are pushing for 4 automatic bids from the SEC and the Big Ten. Now, if we went through and did 4 auto bids last season, we pushed it to 16 teams, for instance. We did 4 auto bids for the SEC. It would be the teams that got in, as well as a cavalcade of other teams tied for 4th place. Alabama, South Carolina, whoever was going to emerge out of that would have gotten an automatic bid. These are teams that did not deserve to make the college football playoff with the season they had. They just simply did not, right? You can talk about, the SEC has better competition, but when you lose to an Oklahoma team by multiple scores, it's just not going to be able to get you in, right? The ACC in this new potential format and the Big 12, this second tier of conference, would each get 2 auto bids, and the group of 5 would get 1. That would leave either 1 at-large bid, basically keeping it open for Notre Dame, or 3, depending on if they went to 14 or 16 teams. That is not okay. Right? Like I was saying, one of the most beautiful things about sports is the fact that it is ever-changing. And if I'm the SEC and the Big Ten, they've already basically negotiated themselves into the most impactful spot, right? With the new CBA, if you will, the new rights agreement that's going out there with these leagues, they've negotiated themselves, and we talked about it last year, a 29% share of the money each, leaving 17% for the ACC and the Big 12, and a diminishing more for those group of 5 teams and Notre Dame. They are taking a massive slice of the pie that should be split a little more equally. They are just 25% of the schools, and they can say, the landscape is ever changing, but they're the ones that are changing the landscape. They went out and got Texas and Oklahoma, the SEC did. The Big Ten basically killed the Pac-12 by getting USC and UCLA everything else splintered from there, right? You kicked Oregon State and Washington State to the shadow realm, basically. Now they're trying to rebuild the remnants of the Pac-12, but it's just going to come back as a third-tier conference, right? They've basically just reformed the Mountain West, and the Mountain West is taking from some other teams. It's just a big mess. The FCS is getting torn apart. And this is a time where the sport is being molded more than any other time in history, right? Not only are we having these massive conference realignments, but we're also getting the addition of NIL. And NIL is going to be an ever-changing process. Earlier this week, they made a ruling. Earlier, Congress had ruled that NIL would have to follow Title IX guidelines, which would have made it really interesting to see how teams developed the women's side of sports with the NIL money. But then they rescinded that. Now NIL is no longer required to be a part of Title IX spending, so they just get a bunch of money to spend on whatever sport they want, which is going to be interesting anyway. You're going to see a lot less funding for some of these Olympic sports, and that might hurt our standing in the world when we go to Olympics, which is a really interesting argument that I saw around Olympics time over the summer. With NIL, it's going to kill our Olympic dominance, right? The U.S. historically and currently is the powerhouse for sports, but China's starting to catch up. Australia is starting to catch up in certain things. And the less funding we put towards these Olympic sports in college, the less attention it gets, the less likely we are going to have these elite athletes continue to go out there and continue to win us medals and continue to improve our standing in the world sports, right? The other countries are catching up. They're catching up fast, and we are just ignoring that in sports everywhere. So the way that NIL is going to change things and the way that this meeting is going to change things kind of go hand in hand. And we'll keep you updated throughout the whole week because they have not come out with anything official yet. But this, when I say that this is a sport-altering meeting, this is a meeting that could change the way that literally everything works in college sports for the future of it forever. Because if they change it to 4 automatic bids for those two, in 20 years when they're no longer the dominant teams, when they're no longer the dominant conferences, it's going to look bad for college football. And we're not going to feel those effects for now, but we're going to feel them in the future when Alabama falls off. We're already seeing start to fall off when Nick Saban retired, when Georgia falls off, when Ohio State starts to slip a little bit for a season or two, when Michigan starts to struggle for a little bit, when these teams aren't 4 bids deep, which they won't be forever. They're always going to be 2 bids deep, most likely. But 4, you cannot expect them to year in, year out for the rest of forever to have 4 teams that are really worthy of making the playoffs. The ACC might have more than 2. The Big 12 might have more than 2. Heck, the Group of 5 might have more than 1. That's going to be a little bit of a crazy future. But with NIL, we're seeing these talents get a little bit more distributed around the world of sports, around the colleges all over the country, right? We're seeing Indiana have a huge growth. We're seeing teams like SMU come out of nowhere and make the playoffs. We're seeing teams like Boise State make the playoffs. Get all of these guys in Arizona State coming in and making a huge splash. We're getting talent more spread out around the world of college football as this NIL thing becomes a bigger deal. So this is going to be a disaster for college football, a crater that will destroy the sport if they do pass this with 4 auto bids each for the rest of time. I think it's a mistake. It might already go that way for the next couple years, and people will argue, oh, they should have just gotten the auto bids. But it is a mistake if you set in stone one conference is better than the other, because that changes constantly in every single sport, and college football is no different. But let me know what you think. How big of a deal would this be if it passed, if they decided that they were going to go for this? What do you think that would do for the future of college football? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow talking everything from around the world of sports. I will see you then. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.